Good morning. I called this talk, Help, How Do I Help? It seemed appropriate that we're talking about suffering and grief and loss, and yet often we don't know how to help others. Sometimes I've had people talking to me saying, I am broken, I am lost, and now someone has just said to me something terrible. They thought they could fix me. I've asked myself this question at times as well, and I believe as Christians, we actually want to help. We do care about others. God's called us to love one another, to love our neighbour. We're going to look at different scenarios that might come up in your workplace, in your church, in your friends and family and wider circles. And I want to share some tools that I've learned as a counsellor, as a pastor's wife, that may help equip you to care for others. I studied to become a counsellor after I was talking to a girl from church who had been sexually abused. I felt at a loss as to know how to comfort her and to help her. I wish I had some sort of way to really help her. And after my attempts of fixing her, offering her scriptural platitudes and praying with her, just didn't seem to make any difference. She was still hurting and didn't know how to cope with what was going on inside her. Yes, I prayed with her and for her. I spoke of the healing power of the gospel, and I saw her weekly for months, all to no seeming avail. However, I do believe that however feeble my attempts may have been, that God can use anything that I said, even the dumb words, or did for his good purposes and glory. One thing he did do was set me on a journey to become a counsellor. So let's have a quick look at what help and care might look like. Help can mean assist, aid, support, encourage, facilitate, got your back, bolster, guide, bear a hand, prop up, serve, comfort, advise, sustain, minister to, mentor, boost, nurture, care for, counsel, hearten. Care can mean attend, nurse, nurture, protect, tend, watch over, mind, minister, mother, or even father a person. 1 Thessalonians 2:7 says, "But we were gentle among you, like a nursing mother taking care of her own children." This is a beautiful picture of how we can be with others. I want to look at some issues that might come up. A wife is unfaithful. A woman is infertile and desperate to have a child. A man in your congregation blatantly lies. A son has turned away from the faith. Or a widow and her son are struggling. Just think about these situations for a minute and think about how you might be able to help these people who are struggling with sin, suffering, and or grieving. These are biblical examples. A wife is unfaithful. Poor old Hosea. He went through a lot. A family member murders the son of a couple, Cain and Abel. I cannot even begin to imagine what this must have felt like for Adam and Eve, to have been in the Garden of Eden. A few short years later, this happens. A woman is infertile and desperate to have a child. There's Hannah and Elizabeth are two examples. Peter blatantly lies. Someone said that yesterday, probably my husband. Imagine hearing a leader denying Jesus. A son's turned away from the faith. I was thinking about this and I was thinking, well, there's any number of King David's sons, and he was a man after God's own heart and had his sons turn away from God. A widow and son were struggling. Here's Elijah helping them out. There are examples galore in the Bible of people in need. I want to talk briefly about some issues that may come across your path. And although I haven't talked to a parent whose son has been killed by his brother, I have talked to a family whose brother was found guilty of murder, and a young man who witnessed the murder of his best friend. Here are some issues that you may come across and that David and I have seen over the many years of helping people. Infertility. Between 1 in 4 and 1 in 5 couples will be unable to conceive a baby after 12 months of unprotected sex. It is affecting millions of people across the world. It means that in a congregation or in a group or in the friends and family you know, there will be very likely several couples who are grieving the loss of their dreams, hopes and expectations. Some will soldier on through IVF and various other treatments. Some may suffer miscarriage after miscarriage. I said yesterday, my mother had 13 miscarriages. She only spoke of it once and the grief of losing so many babies. Yet she bore her grief like a heavy weight around her neck. Although she knew and loved God, this burden clung to her all her days. There was and still is a silence around infertility, a silence that prevents couples from grieving publicly or not announcing they're pregnant until 3 months along. Mental health. It's estimated that mental illness will affect between 1 and 2 Australians sometime in their life. Now, not every one of these will end up in hospital or clinically diagnosed, and nor would they be. But some may well end up on medication for the rest of their lives, like my sister Nairi, who I talked about last night, and need to spend time in hospital with it. And then there's also the carers, the parents who care for their struggling children, or the son and daughter who's caring for the aged parent who has dementia. Don't think that this isn't an issue in churches or our families or friend groups. Alcohol, in particular, flies under the radar because it's legal. You can just go down the shop, you can go to the supermarket and buy it. If someone drinks more, their tolerance rises and they can become quite high functioning, but it affects their lives and their health. Drugs too. Whether it's an addiction to prescription drugs after an operation or an accident or needing sleeping pills to sleep, or our kids go out to a party or a barbecue and they're offered drugs. They're everywhere. I work with this all the time. It is outside of the scope of my talk today, but please do some research on problem drinking and common drugs in Australia. The more you know, the more knowledge you have, the better you are able to help others. Marriage problems. And these are just some of the marriage problems that have come across our door or through our door. Pornography, both male and female struggling with pornography. Domestic violence, both males and females. Infidelity and adultery. Refusing to have sex or sex addiction. Neglect, narcissistic behaviour, anger issues. One spouse decides they don't believe anymore. One drinks heavily every day. One has severe health issues, and this can be mental or physical or both. Financial difficulties, infertility, parenting differences, rape. What if a boy confides to a teacher that they've been abused by an older boy in a church? And I'm really struggling with this because this happened to someone I know A young teen becomes pregnant to the youth pastor. An old man passes away and explicit child pornography was found on his computer, and a young family had recently adopted him as their grandfather. A young girl was raped by her brother. Children who have walked away from the faith, this is a kind of suffering that's unique to faith communities. There is a need to care for the person who has walked away, but also for the parents and the wider family. And it might be grandchildren or it might be a spouse. There are many ramifications from the life that they've chosen to lead as well, away from the Lord. This has become a really big thing. A girl is confused about her identity and starts dressing androgynously. Why do I put big words into my talk? A boy wants to be known as them and they. A woman declares she's a lesbian and a Christian. Grief. A young person finds their best friend dead from hanging. An adult child decides that they don't want anything to do with their parents anymore. A custody case gives the children to the other parent. A parent suffers from dementia and doesn't recognise you anymore. Just a few examples of grief. Just want to talk about this a little bit. Spiritual abuse is a distortion and exploitation of spiritual authority to manipulate, control, use or harm others, mostly through shame and fear. This is Rachel Chen, who's the Director of Teaching and Care at Alenda Centre. She also says it's using vulnerability, it's using really good things to exploit. Sometimes spiritual abuse comes in Christians saying really awful things to others. They may think that they're trying to fix you or they're trying to point out what God's doing to you in your life, and it can come across as spiritual abuse. Yes, we need to be biblical and challenge sin, yet we also need to be loving and caring and gentle with grace and truth, like a nursing mother. It may take someone time to turn from their sin, or they may not want to. That's between them and God. I would encourage you to make it easy for them to return to their faith and to return to church. Let them see God's love for them through you. Maintain contact if possible. Don't gossip about them or about their situation, and keep praying for them. Bullying. Hurt people hurt people. Bullying can happen anywhere, in person or online, at any time, and can be verbal, physical, and social, which is relational. It can be obvious or hidden. It can be within churches, where a certain somebody holds sway in leadership with the finances or in the music group, dictating exactly how we're going to do the music, or in Sunday school, not wanting to let go of their little empire that they have built in Sunday school. Cyberbullying is also huge amongst our young people, though they rarely speak of it. Part of my work with struggling youth, and I know several young people who have died by suicide after being bullied online. Bullying used to take place at school or on the way home or to from school, and it was a physical thing. Now, bullying is happening in the sanctuary of their own home, in their safe space of their bedroom, and we don't see that. Strained relationships. This can be really difficult when you're trying to help people with strained relationships, whether that's between families that have, or two people that cannot see eye to eye, or a man who has difficulty in all his relationships. When helping someone, we often notice that when something big happens, they display behaviours or say things that may surprise you. It might be yelling. It might be using atrocious language or behaviour that's not becoming of someone who professes a Christian. Now you might ask, why have I got a plate of sausages there? I know it's past breakfast. David once came up with an analogy of the sausage. When you hit a sausage with a hammer, what's on the inside comes out. And this is the same for people. I once hit my thumb with a hammer, and I went running to David and said, "There is a God." Now, we'd been Christians for a long time, and he kind of looked at me and went, okay. And I said, "I didn't swear. I've hit my hand with a hammer, and I didn't swear." Now, I would have maybe a few years before that. God changes us. So I was quite thrilled to see that I have been changed. As we look at travelling alongside others through a period of pain and suffering, we may be able to see what's happening for them by what's coming out. We're not to judge. That's not our job. That's God's. However, we can guide and encourage them to stay close to God. This illustration also focuses us on ourselves and what's inside us. As we journey with people, what are our attitudes and thoughts that come up for us? Are we frustrated that they're not taking our advice? Do we have lots of advice that they need to be listening to, and we're getting ignored, getting annoyed with them as they don't listen and they keep on sinning? Let's look at some ways we can help and support people who we know are suffering. You cannot fix them, and you definitely cannot save them. You cannot change them or their circumstances. Only the Lord can do all that. You may have all the right scriptures at hand, all the right answers that will make things better, but without humility, grace, compassion, wisdom, and the Holy Spirit, the right verses and the right answers will mean nothing. Angela, the mother of Astrid, who I talked about last night, who had died in a car accident at 17, said, "Are you over it?" That was a comment I received 3 months after Astrid passed away. Surprisingly, I didn't get upset at the comment, but realised they had no idea what it was to grieve a loved one. And it isn't that everyone's response to a situation that they just want to fix it or you. They either gloss over it or they give you glib homily. The reality at times is too big to comprehend. Another thing that we might do when we see someone suffering is to do or say nothing, because we don't want to say the wrong thing, or we don't know what to say, or they might start crying. A widow recently told me that when her husband was dying of cancer, a lot of people in the church never talked to her. She knew they were struggling to know what to say, but she felt very alone during that time. So, how can we help? This has to be your first go-to prayer. Before, during, after. Pray for God's wisdom, His strength, kindness and compassion. Pray for Him to give you that extra special gift of love and grace for the people you are reaching out to. Because when you have been seeing a couple for years and years with marriage difficulties, you will need God's love for them. Be thankful in all things. Give Him all glory and praise and honour. Any good work that may be done is done through Christ, for it is God who works in you, both to will and to work for His good pleasure. Relationship. We are created for a relationship, both vertically and horizontally, with God and the people around us. God put us into families, extended families, church families, work communities, sports and other kinds of clubs. And as we rub shoulders with people around us, as we live our lives together, we build relationships. Relationship underpins the help that we are able to offer people. If someone is suffering because of a sinful attitude, who are they more likely to listen to? Someone they know by sight at church, or a dear friend who comes alongside them, listens to them and talks to them of their sin? I remember a pastor many years ago asking me to talk to a particular young woman about something. Okay, she was a greeter at the door and her top was really low. As I had a relationship with her, which his wife did not. I'm still friends with this lovely woman, and I met her a few weeks ago, and we were laughing about my awkward meeting with her and how she accepted it because it was me and not the pastor's wife, who she didn't really know. Yesterday I talked about finding your people that will travel with you, will pray with you, will listen to you, nurture those relationships. In my work as a counsellor, I'm aiming to build a relationship where trust is fostered and care and compassion is shown. This is where the work is really done. This can be very hard for people who have lost trust in people and can take a long time to build up, and yet it is in the trust of a relationship that someone will talk about their deepest fears, hopes, traumas. I have a girl who I work with who's in a gang. Do you have gangs here? I'm not sure. She doesn't trust anyone. She's been in prison and was mandated to have drug and alcohol counselling on her release. I've been seeing her for almost 2 years now, weekly, and she's only just beginning to open up a little bit. But I see hope. I see a glimmer of change. I asked a few people if they could think of something or some things that have been helpful or would have been helpful when they were suffering, and number one was being listened to. It's been my experience that many people are listening for a pause in the words so they can say their piece. This isn't listening. When people perceive that we are not listening, the drawbridge will go up and they will not share their inner thoughts and feelings. The story may even change to become more like what they think you want to hear. So let us look at really listening or active listening. The point of really listening is to be able to understand their point of view, what they are feeling, what has happened to them, how are they coping or not, seeking to understand. Active listening is using direct eye contact. I'll look at a person who is talking, and it's up to them whether they look back at me or they can wander off and then they can come back. They see that I am there concentrating on them. Using minimal verbal cues like and I see, to encourage further talking. Non-verbal communication, nodding, hands. I have a friend who, when she's counselling, she'll sit in her chair and she'll sit there like this and just have her hands on her laps. And it's showing that she's open and she's there caring for the person. Leaning forward like this shows that I'm really, really concentrating on you. Lower your voice and slow it down. I'm not advocating the kind of talking that's portrayed on movies that go, oh, I see, What I am saying is that it really helps with people seeing that you are really listening to them. Asking open-ended questions. What, how, why, and where, always with the goal of understanding them. Summarising. Using their words, condensing and restating the person's main points. It helps you to understand their concerns and helps them to gain clarity. It can offer them a sort of emotional snapshot, helping them to see the bigger picture, condensing what they say so that they can hear that you've heard them correctly, but also they can hear what they've been saying back to them. And sometimes they go, oh no, I didn't mean that. Paraphrasing is basically the same, but saying it in your own words. Clarification. This is when you're asking these questions about the what, why, and where, seeking to understand, especially if they're unclear or ambiguous, making sure that you're both on the same page. It's easy for us to assume we know what they're talking about. I've asked people, can we just back up the bus here? I think I've missed a bit. Paraphrase and ask, have you understood them rightly? This is the bit we all love, don't we? We love challenging people. But gently challenge. Gently challenge inconsistencies and discrepancies in their thoughts and behaviours. And this helps encourage self-reflection and growth. However, it can also feel brutal. So use sparingly, carefully, gently, and check in with them how they are now feeling. Silence. Sitting in silence is often necessary. This can be hard to do, especially if we are talkers or we feel uncomfortable with silence. If your thoughts are jumbled up and all over the place, silence gives time and space to sort out what to talk about or not. Don't be afraid of silence or feel the need to fill it, especially if someone looks like they're thinking and feeling very hard. You can gently ask after a while, what's going on for you now? Or just wait until they speak. Silence can often bring on tears. And here they are. Tears are good. I think we're a bit afraid of them. In our Western society, we tend to try and stop people from crying. We say things like, oh, it's okay, it'll work out. And especially to kids, oh, you don't need to cry. Well, actually, they do. They're a natural release of feelings. God's given us tears. Don't try and stop people from crying. Just let them know by a hand on their shoulder or arm that you see their tears and it's okay to cry. A friend of mine cried every time we sang, and still sing, When Peace Like a River in church, because it had been her late husband's favourite hymn. It's okay. A sermon or a prayer about children not following the Lord might bring tears. It's okay. Some griefs are fresh in our minds and tears come. Or something pops out of the blue and reminds you, and tears come. It's okay. Psalm 56 verse 8 says, You have kept count of my tossings. You put my tears in your bottle. Are they not in your book? The Lord stores and records our tears. Tears of sadness actually have a higher quality of stress hormones than tears that we shed when we're peeling an onion. They flush out bitterness and anger and help release the emotions that we have inside us. Community. God has put us into a community of believers, the local church or the local group that we meet with. We do not need to do or be everything to someone that we're helping. Now, don't ask me to make a meal for you. I tend to overthink it, then I get distracted because I've got ADHD, and then I'll burn the thing. So I'll end up going and buying a hot chicken and some coleslaw from Coles. There are some wonderful other people in church I've found whose love language is cooking. Fantastic. However, if you want someone to talk to, someone who will listen, bring tissues and give you a hug, I'll be right there. You don't have to do it all. When a person you're helping and their problems are too big, find help. There are other people around you. Remember that small group I've been talking about, your people. They can help you. At least pray for them. Someone else can transport them to the doctor or make a meal. They could visit them too. Someone could do their housework or their gardening, whatever practical things that they need to be done. People in the church may be able to help out financially. Doctors can help out with medication. Counsellors and agencies can help with trauma, sexual abuse, etc. But God so composed the body, giving greater honour to the part that lacked it, and that there may be no division in the body, but that the members may have the same care for one another. If someone suffers, we all suffer together. If one member is honoured, we all rejoice together. I believe that God has given each of us gifts and talents, then that when we all work together, He covers all the bases. A friend of mine put it this way: we need to stay in our lane when helping others. We do what we can do, and others can do what they do best. For example, I was counselling someone with drug and alcohol addiction, and then found out they have a $300 a day gambling problem. I referred them to the Problem Gambling Foundation for help, but I continued to see them for the drug and alcohol addiction and the trauma that they were feeling, but I let them deal with the gambling. Empathy. I'm going to show a short video by Brene Brown. She's a research professor at Houston University. I don't know where she stands with respect to the Lord, but I have found her work on vulnerability, shame, and empathy very helpful. So let's play that.
And why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think that empathy is this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, I'm down. I know what it's like down here. And you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no. You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. I have it, yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. At least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Oops. I hope that you found that helpful. I don't know what she means by sacred space when you're down in the bottom of the pit. But don't let that distract you. I think it was very helpful. Everyone's unique and different. None of us have the same backgrounds, upbringing, experiences, and yet, even within the same family, and yet we can help others by relating to something that feels similar within us. Saying, oh yes, I totally understand, is probably not that helpful because we don't know everything about them. But what we can say is something like, I went through the death of my father too. Tell me about how you're feeling about your dad's passing. We're to bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. Be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, as God and Christ forgave you. If you don't know what to say and you feel awkward and don't want to say the wrong thing, be honest and say something, I don't know what to say, but I do care about you. How can I pray for you? Humility. I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but you will not have all the answers for everyone's particular problems. I certainly don't have all the answers. I may have a few tools I can offer and say this might be helpful or that might be helpful. I can sit there and listen to them, but I don't have all the answers. What you've been through may be similar but not the same. Be humble. Trust God for wisdom. This is His work. All too often I have heard of well-meaning Christians going in and trying to fix others. But Philippians 3 says, do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. And Ephesians 4 says, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love. Talking of brotherly love and a tender heart. If you don't have brotherly love or sisterly love and a tender heart for someone, and we all know who they are, immediately someone will come to mind. I'm quite convinced that when we pray these kinds of prayers, God loves answering them. This is praying according to His will. Of course, He will then bring the most unlovable, obnoxious person in your path and then fill you with love for them. Be an example of a humble, vulnerable, godly person who loves God and cares for others. Be gentle with others. If someone tells you they are watching pornography and struggling with their marriage, that probably took a lot of courage and mulling over to be able to say that to you. Don't rush in and say, well, you just got to stop watching the thing. Be gentle. Listen to them. Listen to how they are travelling with that and why they want to change. Why have they come to you and told you this? So this is the point in the conference that I usually hate because I'm going to get you to discuss with other people. What I want you to do is to take some of these skills that we've been talking about and split into two groups of 2 or 3 or 4 if that's convenient. And I'm going to ask I was going to ask you to talk about how it was for you coming to the conference. But then I thought it might go a bit deep. I'm an overthinker. And I thought someone might say, well, I had to rush out the door. The kids were crying and screaming. Now my husband and I aren't talking to each other. And yeah, I thought that might go a bit deep. So perhaps the question to ask one another is, nice and safe, how are you finding the conference so far? And put your listening skills into practice. And I'll give you a few minutes to do that. Go. I'm not doing it. You're doing it. Oh, you can listen to me, David. I was a bit worried about what I was going to start here. You can continue your listening skills at morning tea, which I can see through the door, which looks amazing. Now, some people struggle to know what's going on for them. They have so many things, so many feelings going on with them. And So I've developed a model that I've been working on for the last few years, especially for visual learners like me or people who need something visual, but often it helps for people to kind of externalise what's going on for them. What feelings have they got on for them? What issues have they got for them? So this is the bucket. In Māori, I call it the toku pākete, which is my bucket. It's a framework. The bucket is holding the issues that they've got inside them. It may be old stuff, things from their childhood, trauma. That often sits at the bottom, the old stuff. Sometimes it bubbles to the top and comes bubbling out, but mostly it just is. The rest of the bucket is what's present in their lives right now. The top of the bucket is the freshest thing, the thing that they're struggling with the most, and that may be overflowing the bucket, which might be a toothache. They've got a very full bucket, they've got a lot of things going on, and they don't understand why this toothache is just absolutely blowing them away. Around the outside of the bucket, which stops your bucket from totally just blowing out, are the people who are supportive, who love you, have got your back, or it might be your dog. I usually put the most important person or people at the bottom, and it might be God or mum or auntie. People often talk about keeping the lid on everything, so we've talked about what do they use to keep that lid on? What are their coping mechanisms? Things like drugs, alcohol, medication, staunchness. That's my gang girl. She is staunch and nobody's lifting that bucket lid. Laughter. I have a client who will make a joke out of everything, and it's been taken me quite a while to get past that laughter so he can actually talk about what's going on inside him. Deflection. Deflecting off. Oh, any questions? Someone will say, how are you feeling today? Oh, I'm okay. How are you? And what's your day been like? They're deflecting. Disconnection. They can just disconnect from other people. Being stoic. They might use self-harm or sleeping all the time or harmful eating. All those go on your lid. The ladle is what empties your bucket. Praying, talking, counselling, tears, journaling, drawing, rapping, poetry, creativity, support groups, things like that. And let's look at the two handles. They can make the bucket lighter. There's a lot of research around using your body. If you're doing exercise, it can stave off or help with depression. So walking, running, massage, physiotherapy, dancing, sleeping, being on the beach, gym, tramping, exercise classes. David's the expert on all the exercise. I do exercises. He does everything else. Spirituality. Excuse my rather crude bucket. I realised when I got here that I had left my proper printout at home, and so I had to draw this. I drew this not last night, the night before. So it's actually supposed to be spirituality. Going to church, being in nature, faith, studying God's word, singing, praying, gardening, art. All those things can help make your bucket lighter. I find this also helpful for me to understand what's going on for them and for them to see they have actually got people around them who are supporting. They don't often realise that. They see what their coping mechanisms are, and it also brings into conversation spirituality and faith. So here's an example that I did on Saturday as I was thinking about this conference and this talk, and I was feeling very stressed and agitated. So I have things in the bottom of my bucket: adoption, rejection, not feeling good enough. Actually, the not feeling good enough did come up for me. But family issues, Nairi's death, that took a good 2 months away from work that I had been thinking time I would have for my talk. I was packing, lack of sleep, I had to do David's ironing, had to getting back home again. I'm already stressing about getting back home again. This is ridiculous because I'm doing it on my own. Catching planes, I get terribly stressed around catching planes. My to-do list was like this long. And I had 2 full days of work, which I didn't actually put in there, that I had to do as well. But outside my bucket, supporting my bucket, I've got God, David, my children, which are also on the inside of my bucket, the New Zealand Christian Counsellors Association, the team that I have on the exec, my workmates, my friends, my grandchildren. They're supporting to keep my bucket together. I did some exercises, do a lot of deep breathing and walking. Singing and faith and praying also keep my bucket lighter. I did a lot of art, a journal, lists for Africa helped me, talking and praying. And my coping mechanisms are art, alone time. I deflect and I disconnect. Laughter, music really helps me. And also Magnum Minis. They are so underrated. David's always wondering why we've got Magnum Minis in the freezer. I hope that might be helpful for somebody. It's very easy to draw. It doesn't take much, and that's what I wanted. It was a thing that we could be used easily. Compassion fatigue. I just want to quickly talk about looking after yourself as you're helping others. You need to put on your oxygen mask first before you can help others. And that's part of what we were talking about yesterday, was doing all those things that can help you be strong in the Lord so that you're not rocked and swayed when tough times come. It often happens in caring professions or people who are caring for others that they can take on the trauma of others and or the care of others, and can be very, very difficult. Boundaries. I just want to talk about boundaries and putting in boundaries around people that you're helping. A friend of mine described it as being like a hedge of protection around yourself and around your family. You all have your own families and responsibilities, and you need to protect your time and energy so that you can be a blessing to others. I have a dear friend who was helping a woman, I'll call her Mary, who was having difficulties in her marriage. Her husband, my friend's husband, was helping Mary's husband, and they met. At times, they all met together, and at other times, they would meet separately. There were weeks when Mary would ring and visit and text my friend several times. Then Mary's mother would ring my friend, concerned about the marriage and what was going on. My friend's husband had almost the opposite. He struggled to meet with the husband, who was tried to chase him down. He was getting quite frustrated at times because the husband refused to talk to him. This went on for months. The situation tried my friends severely, and they were utterly exhausted. Their bucket, as it were, was full to the brim, and yet they felt a very real calling to help this couple in the church. And that's when my friend called me. In this sort of situation, it's really important to put in boundaries around contact. Texts. Don't answer them straight away. That's the beauty of having texts, right? Wait until the morning, until you have sufficient time to think about a response. Phone calls. Don't answer them unless you have time to talk to them and know how to say. And you need to, if you do answer it, say, wow, that sounds really big. Let's meet later in the week. Visits. Now, this is also for some of you who do visits with others when you're trying to help others and it goes on for hours and hours and hours. Restrict your meeting together for an hour, maybe 2 if you do not see each other for very, very often. If you're actively listening, it's tiring for you, but it's also tiring for them. If you are meeting them for an hour, everything that they need to say in that time will be enough for them to work through. There is always going to be more. Well, there often is a lot more. And so talking to them for longer than an hour, it just gets tiring. People say just waffle on then. Try and keep it concise. Try and keep it to the issue that is actually going on. Try and keep them to meeting once a week. You sort of feel like if I'm helping someone who's in desperate need, that I should be meeting them really often. I had a girl who was suicidal, and I did meet her twice in 1 week because she really, really needed it. But that was maximum, and I met her for an hour each time. That's all she needed. If you see them at church or Bible study or the supermarket and they start to engage you in an in-depth conversation, politely suggest that you meet them later in the week at a more appropriate place and time. Again, for an hour or maximum 2. If you have to put a timer on, do it. If you have to say, well, I've got another engagement, my other engagement might be going home and seeing my husband. Well, that's an engagement. Look after yourselves. This is hard work. Now I want to talk about some of the blessings. We can be richly blessed by helping others. Colossians says, put on then as chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness and patience. And then Galatians says, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness. We see the growth of fruit in ourselves, if not in the person that we're helping, but we can see that growth of fruit in ourselves, that growth and maturity in the Lord. We're fulfilling his commands as we become more and more obedient to the Lord, and we grow to be more and more like Jesus. Another blessing is it takes our minds off our own difficulties. It takes our focus off ourselves and onto another person. Suddenly our stuff doesn't always seem so big. You will be changed and blessed. Recently I was rostered on to the Drug-ARM van that was sitting. I was sitting inside beside our lovely hot fire after dinner, listening to the wind and the hail and the pouring rain. I really did not want to go out in that. And I was sort of, can we cancel? However, I went and I was so blessed. We had about 30 people turn up to the van for hot food, a drink, blankets, clothes, sleeping bags. They were so thankful and so happy we'd come, that Drug-ARM had come out for them. It even snowed while we were out. That was that cold. And I couldn't help but be humbled. I was changed by that experience. I realised that by giving, I am blessed. I'm also very thankful that I have a hot fire and a warm dinner to go home to. Serving the Lord Jesus Christ. As I help others, I'm serving the Lord. I'm doing what I believe he has called me to do at this point in time. It isn't easy. Life isn't easy. But by serving him, I'm doing what I can to shine his light in the world. So, love one another. Help others by really listening with empathy, humility, and may you know the riches and blessings of helping others who are suffering and grieving. Thank you.